Hello everyone, my name's Jake. Wanted to make a little video today. I know a lot of you out there, including myself, have the old Chicago rock tumbler, either the single or the dual drum. You get them at Harbor Freight, they're cheap. You buy them when you're starting out because none of us know whether we're going to have the patience for this or be any good at it. I get it. I did it. I bought the extended warranty. I'm not gonna lie, the very first one, I made a whole bunch of rookie mistakes and I destroyed it, but so I took it back. The second one I got, the bearings went bad in. They start clicking or grinding, they won't turn the barrels. So I took it back. Got this one. This one ran for almost a year before it finally started going bad. So, same thing, the bearings started going bad, they click, they grind, they make a terrible sound. So, I finally got tired of going back, and I purchased a Lortone 33B, which is the quality version of this, and, well, it's running as we speak. But, there was a man, I'll tag him below, made a post about being able to replace the bearings in these for really cheap. So I decided to do it. I thought I'd make a video of doing it, show you a couple things I learned in the process of getting the right bearings. And yeah, let's just replace the bearings in this thing and see how it goes. I'm no professional. I'm just an average person. So got a few tools here. Little hammer, Phillips flathead, pair needle nose, little punch. You never know if you need a pry bar. So got some bearings, cup of coffee. So let's take this thing apart and see how this goes. Thought I'd make a video so we could do it together maybe. Okay, I know it's not going to be that good. I'm kind of new to video making, but here we go. So taking the barrels off. I don't feel like I should have to say this. I feel like I should say it. However, make sure you unplug it. Make sure it's not plugged in when you're doing this. You don't really want to ride the Blue Dragon. It's not as cool as it sounds. So just unplug it. It's common sense. Anyway, so I am going to remove both the top and the bottom covers on this. I have giant Sasquatch hands, so I'll need all the room I can get to get my hands in here and get everything out. These Phillips head screws in these sometimes can be kind of a bear to get out, the way they just kind of go through the sheet metal. So just make sure you have good downward pressure on your screwdriver, especially if it's the first time you've taken it apart. This is like the 20th time I've had one of these apart. So, okay, top's off. It's several layers with little spacers, so just kind of keep it all together and set it off to the side, or else it just kind of falls apart. Okay, flip her over. Take these screws out of the bottom here. Okay, I like to keep everybody together. Set that off to the side. Alright, so now what I would suggest doing at this point is take your phone, and I did the same thing, take some pictures in here, just so you can see how everything's oriented. You can see where this green wire is going. Flip it over, take some more pictures, get a good picture of the switch so that you remember where the red and the black wire go. There's spacers in here, how all this goes together. I'll show you when we get it apart, but I would suggest taking a picture of the fan so you remember how far back it sets on the motor in here. So just take a second, flip it over, take some good pictures from both sides, because you're going to forget something by the time you put it back together. I did. I was glad that I took pictures. So unplug the switch. You just pinch these up near where they're on the switch. Don't grab the wire. If you grab the wire back here, sometimes with the cheaper units, you can pull it out of the little connector. So grab it up here near where it's connected. Wiggle it a little, pull. It'll come right off. Okay, and then flip it over. Initially this white wire will have a little zip tie on it. You don't have to break the little zip tie off. If you do, it will give you more room to bring the unit out, because I leave this connected because this is actually a little crimp. It's not a twist off like the home ones. It's a crimp, more like the auto ones. So I leave it connected. But if you cut the zip tie, you'll get more room. You'll just have to tuck it up out of the way when you're done. So there you go. Get that loose. This green wire is below here. So now our electrical is undone from the motor. What I did was I flipped it around, and I don't know if you can see it, but I just used my screwdriver to scribe on the metal where it was set. You can use a permanent marker, you can use whatever, you can eyeball it. You can also take a picture of it if you just want to take a picture of it and do it that way. Reason being, my belt was running just fine. Some of these have belt adjustment issues. Mine was running just fine on here, no problems. I had replaced it with the more O-ring style belt, but it was running good, so I like it right there. I just wanted to mark that before I took it apart so that I could put it right back and save on having to adjust it later. So now that we've marked it, our electrical's unhooked, let's go ahead and loosen up the motor itself. It's going to work better if you're sitting it like this, or if you have it turned over, to loosen the bottom screws first. If you loosen the top screws first, as you loosen the bottom ones, the motor tries to fall over, and it just makes the whole thing harder for you. Now notice, as you're loosening this little plate on the bottom here, it already came loose from the back one. It's going to fall out. And if you don't pay attention, it just falls out onto your table. And there we go. I'm knocking tools off the table. But so you end up with this little, sort of like a double nut plate that's on the back side of the motor. Here's the one that's still attached. And that's what the screws on the end actually go through the motor. There's a plastic spacer that you'll notice only fits one way on here. So it's got a notch cut out of it that goes over this bracket. I'll show you when I have it apart. But it only goes one way, but it's in between, and it'll be loose too. So it'll be loose in there too. I'm going to leave these stuck through here. Set this aside. I'll loosen the other screws. When you're putting it back together, this part is a little frustrating to put back together. just because you're going to end up with several loose components that you're trying to hold together. This one out of the way, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that one out of the way since everybody's loose in here now. Okay. Okay, so the second one's out. Set it aside. I've taken one of the motor bolts out. They have a little lock washer and a little flat washer on them, so make sure and don't lose those. Set that off to the side. Okay, now my motor is fully loose. I've pulled one of the screws out up here, so I'll pull the other out. And then this spacer becomes loose. There's the little notch I was talking about. You use the center two holes on these. The center two, not the outers. The little notch is cut out so it goes over this bracket. It doesn't fit the other way. So that's out. Set it to the side. The other one's out. Make sure you have both washers. Set it to the side. This plate is going to become loose. It's going to come off as well. On this end, the green wire was a ground that one of those screws holds on, so it'll come off. Now it'll be loose. So go ahead and pull your two screws out of here. If you make sure and hold the motor up against the inside of the wall so it's not crooked, it makes pulling your screws out a lot easier. Set those to the side. This will now come off. Set it to the side. You'll have one more plastic spacer just like the other one. They're interchangeable, they're the same. Again, you use the center holes. Set it to the side. Now, I like to keep all those together. Put all that in a little group. Now, you want to kind of keep a hold of your motor at this point because it'll be fully undone. Now you can slip your belt off. There we go. I like to bring it out the bottom. This is the bottom. You can bring it out the top if you want. Okay, now if you've just undone that zip tie that was on this white wire, you'll have plenty of room to bring your motor out and leave that attached. So now we need to take the fan pulley off. Now an easy way to remember where this is at is the shaft that runs out of the motor comes through the middle of this fan, and it's just even with the outside. So when you're putting it on, if you just put your finger over the outside and push it on until you can feel it's even, you'll be right where it needs to go. So it's got a set screw. We're gonna loosen that. You don't need to take it all the way out. Just loosen it. You'll be able to slide the fan off. There is a flat spot on the shaft. That is where the set screw seats. When you screw it back down, that's so it can seat nice and flat and keep the fan to where it doesn't freewheel on the shaft. So that's it. Your fan's out. Set it to the side. Now, here's what we're after. There's a bearing in this bracket right here. And if you flip it over, there's a bearing in this bracket here. Now, the single barrel version, which I don't have. Oh, I'm sorry. My cat is wanting attention. Hi, little ghost. The man that posted originally, there is a rubber cup with a slightly larger bearing in it on that model. I recommend, whichever model you have, you take it apart first and see what style motor you have. Either one you can get the bearings for. Because I originally got the bearings from the original post. You have to get them with little bushings for the middle to make the center hole large enough. but that's for the rubber cup model, which I believe is the single barrel. Oh, I know, Daddy's making a video. Version of the Chicago Electric. The Lee Goals, I see other ones online that are Chinese brands. They are the same as these. So take your motor apart first, see what bearings you have in there. You'll be able to get online and get the right ones the first time, so it won't be a big deal. So here's your motor. We got to get it apart. There's 2 screws. Now, the first time I was looking at this, I was messing with it. These screws are pretty tight. I boogered one of them up, but it's still usable. There's kind of a captured nut on both sides on the back. They will come loose when you're taking it apart, so just don't let them fly away. But these were pretty tight when I first took it apart, and I had to just set it down. And I had to take my hammer and just, just tickle it a little bit. Just give her a few tickles, feed it an onion or 2. And then keep a lot of downward pressure and just slowly loosen them. Make sure you have a good screwdriver that's not too messed up on the ends, and you'll be able to get it apart. Just have patience with this part because it was kind of tough at first. So here we go. There's one. The nut came off there. So there's 2. I believe that one's loose. Okay. Now, when they're both loose, I was wrong. That one is not loose yet. There we go. That nut came off. So, 2 nuts came off. So now you'll be able to either slide just the bracket or the whole motor. But in this case, the bracket, you may have to wiggle it a little. They're a 0 tolerance bearing, which means they slide on there snug, but they're not pressed. So you'll be able to pull this off, the bracket. One will come off the back side. You set this aside now. Here's your motor. There's the bracket with the other bearing on the back side. So now, I like to... Don't let that roll away. They like to try to just thread these nuts back on here. Okay, set that to the side. Actually, we're learning. Take these out of here because you're gonna need this bracket. So take those out of there. Set that stuff to the side. Okay, now we need to get this bracket off the back side of this. If you wiggle it back and forth, just wiggle it back and forth. That's all I did was wiggled it, jiggled it, gave it a little loving. Sometimes you have to talk to them just right. It'll come off. So now this bracket is empty because the bearing we're after is right here. And you can feel it. It's not any good. I can almost count the number of bearings left in there. Okay, and the other one is inside of this front bracket. Looks just like the rear bracket. And like the other parts, they're exactly the same. You don't have to remember which end you got them off of. The empty one, set it to the side. You don't need it right now. So now we need to get the bearing out of this bracket. It's not hard. I sat it down. I took a flathead screwdriver, hit it once. You'll be able to get to this inner portion with your screwdriver on the inside of this bracket hole. Just hit it a couple of times on one side. If it doesn't come out, go opposite side and hit it a couple times and it'll pop out of your bracket. So there's one of them, and yeah, it's bad too. So there's one. I'm going to set that down. Now we don't need this right now, so I'm going to set it to the side. All right, now this was slightly trickier to figure out how to get this bearing off the other end of this. I did notice there is a spring, what looks to be a spring on the shaft going outwards against the inside of this bearing. So I haven't had this one off yet. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Be aware there's a spring. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but why I say it's tricky is because you have to hold the bearing somehow and kind of tap this motor out of it. It shouldn't be tight. It should be like the other side, but I've only got two hands. So here's what I came up with. I flipped the machine back over. I went down to the end where it's just freewheels. I take the motor, and in between there's a little space. So I'm going to hook it on there just like that. Okay. And I got a punch that's just round and flat on the end. I'm going to hold it against the end of the shaft there. I'm just going to give her some love and see if I can tap it out of there. Yep. There she went. So, okay. So there is a spring. I got lucky and it didn't fly away. I probably should have put a pad, paper towel or something down here for the motor to fall on, but I didn't. Anyway, so there we go. The other bearing is off of there. Now, this is where, when you get them apart, you can take the bearing, and I don't know if it'll focus on it. It doesn't look like it, but right here you can see there's a number. These ones, for the dual drum, say 626Z. The letter I don't think means anything. If you get on Amazon and put in 626 bearing, these will pop up, a whole bunch of them. Basically, I took it to work and measured it too. They are 6 millimeters thick. They have a 6 millimeter ID, or inside diameter, the hole, and they are a 19 millimeter OD, outside diameter. So 6, 19, 6, or a 626 bearing. The other ones were a different size. For the single with the rubber cup, the outside diameter is larger, as you can see. The inside diameter is still 6 millimeters. That's why we had to get these bushings. So if you have the single barrel rubber cup model, that's what you'll need. Somebody can contact me if you need these. I don't have that model. So, but anyway, got on Amazon. Here's the part number for anybody needing them. It's a 10 pack. The one I got, there's a lot of them. The 10 pack is, these were chrome steel instead of regular carbon steel. So in theory, they should last longer than the originals that are in there. I don't know if they will, but they come in a 10 pack. Handy little tube. So, you know, you can get several more rebuilds out of her. They're about, I don't know, 15 bucks, something like that. So anyway, got new ones. Same size. Everything's good. And they feel just like butter. So now all that's left to do is to put her back together. So first I'm going to put the one on this end. This bearing was just, the face of the center port here was just flush with the end of the shaft, and there is this spring. So make sure that stays on there. I'm just going to set it down. You shouldn't have to hit very hard. If you're hitting really hard, something's not going right. So just going to set the shaft against the table here. Oops. Okay, I had a little crud on there actually. So make sure that's nice and clean. Yeah, take two. Oh, okay. So I didn't even need to use a hammer actually. So what's going to end up holding that one on is the bracket. So just don't let it fly away. Your other one, now you're going to need to get your stuff back here. Everything's going to try to run away. Don't let it if you can. Okay, let's take the other new one. Just press it down with your fingers inside your bracket here. It's going to slide down over the front. Drop some more stuff off your bench because that's what you're trying to do. That's the goal. So, here's your motor. Okay. You've got your bearing and your new bracket. Slide it through. There's little feet on these brackets that fit into the holes on here. Lose your spring again because that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so spring, new bearing. Okay, it just pushes real easy, so get it on there. Get your bracket. Actually, it would be easier to pop that into the new bracket and then just center it up. Okay, just kind of push on the motor until you can see the end of the shaft will snap in there and be perfectly flush with the bearing. Both of your brackets are fully seated. You can hold it together, you can turn it. Oh, that feels nice. So that's nice and smooth with those new bearings. So now get your two little nuts here and your two long screws, and we're going to put it back together. This part is springy, so you're going to have to use one hand to hold it together. These have flat sides, so they'll hold your nut in place. It kind of helps you out a little bit. Once again, if you have smaller hands, this might be easier. So, just kind of hold it all together. start your screw. You'll be able to feel it on the end of your finger on this side. I run it down until it can't come apart, but it's not tight yet. Don't tighten the stuff till you have both started. So flip it around. Same thing on this side. This nut doesn't want to. These are, you know, made of questionable Chinese quality, so stuff doesn't always fit exactly as intended. Sometimes it's an estimation. Same thing, get everything started. Now you can go ahead and tighten it down. Since these were fairly tight to begin with, I want to try to get them fairly tight to end up with, but don't go overboard. Just snug it up real nice. Okay, there's one. Flip her back over. Now I can't get the screwdriver in there. Okay. There we go. So it's back together. It's been so nice and smooth. All right. Now, the probably second most frustrating part, putting this thing back together. Let's start by putting our fan back on it. So make sure pulley side goes out. Find your flat spot on your shaft there. Make sure your set screw is where it can tighten down on that. And then this is the same thing. The shaft is just flush with the end of the pulley. Sometimes it's easier to feel where you're starting that. If you run this set screw down and look through the center, probably not going to be able to see it. But if you run it in until you can just see the tip of it starting to come through, just the tip, there we go. Probably can't see it, but no. But anyway, so then you'll be able to feel that you're on. Push that's too far. That you're on the flat spot where it can set, and then just flush on the end there. Miss the screw because you drank 2 giant things of coffee. Now your hands are shaking, but all right. So flush on the end. The screw is on the flat spot, and you can feel it when you tighten it down. Kind of grab the flat spot a little bit. So tighten the set screw. There we go. Your fan's back on. All right, so it's time to put the motor back in, which is where you get a little frustration because there's so many moving parts to this. Your red wire, your black wire that's in here, make sure they go up. Again, I'm doing this from the bottom, so make sure they go up. This green wire, your ground, can stay down here, because here's your holes where it mounts. So put your motor back in. Hook your belt back on as you're doing that, because that's the easiest time. Okay, so belt's on. Your white wire stays down here. Your black and red wires, they go up top. Your green wire stays down here. So now you got to hold a bunch of stuff in place and put it back together. So now we want our long screws with the washers. times 4. Our spacers times 2. Our little nut plates times 2. On our bracket for the end. So I've got it marked so I know which way it goes back on the end here. Here's what I do. You can do this however you want per your frustration level in this part, because like I said, there's a lot of moving things that have to be placed in here, hooked together. So I take a spacer, I figure out which way it needs to be oriented, which if you're doing it from the bottom is like this. You're going to be using the center holes. So I take 2 of my long screws and I get them started through the end here. And I look inside. And I also start them in this spacer. Okay, so they're both started in the spacer now. Now, take your motor, I'm just trying to fall out the other side at this point. Get them started in the 2 holes in it. And going through, and there we go, they're poking out the other side. Your spacer's in there. Now the bottom side, if you took pictures, I had to look at my pictures to remember, the green ground wire goes over the end of this screw. Okay. And make sure that it's against the metal base. The green ground wire needs to be against the metal base, okay? Now you can take one of your nut plates. At this point you're holding way too many things together for 2 hands only, but unless you have a helper, which maybe some of you do. Alright. So I try to hold it over the one with the wire on it first. Get my screwdriver out here and just try and hope that it starts, and you'll feel it on the end of your finger. It did. So there's one started. Then put your screwdriver in the second one. Do the same thing, hold it on the end, feel for it to start. There we go, it did start. I like to pull it up. You're not going to tighten these all the way, but I like to pull it up a little closer on the inside so there's not as much room for the motor to try to fall out while you do the other side. So there we go, those are all started. The ground wires between the base here, everything's started. The spacer's back in, the white wire's down below, the other 2 wires are going up. So now we're going to flip it over. Don't lose any of your parts that you're going to need. Get the tools you don't need out of the way. So there we go. We're going to flip it over to the top now. This side's a little easier because you don't have a wire to contend with. But basically the same thing. You're going to feed screws in here. You're going to make sure your spacer is oriented the correct way so that it goes over this bracket. Center holes. Feed your screws in. Through the spacer. Hold your motor up. Get your screws started in it. And at this point it'll be looking pretty good. Get your nut plate. Hold it over the end. Use your hand to once again hold way too many things together at once. One at a time. Get these to start. There's the first one. Just have patience. That's the main thing. Okay, so everything's started. Everybody's started. Nothing's going to fall apart on you now. Now's a good time to make sure your red and black wires are kind of routing where you want them to go. They're going to go up to your switch. Your belt's on. Now you can go ahead, and this is where you may have to refer to some pictures, marks that you made previously. So now line up your bracket, line up your marks, make sure your belt tension's good. It feels fine. It looks good. You can even turn it at this point and make sure that nobody hits anybody. See, like there, I have my fan sticking a little too far out. So I'm going to loosen the set screw. I'm going to pull it back. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that until I have the motor tightened up. So, like I said, line everything up, get everything where you want it. Check your belt tension, do the hokey pokey, turn yourself around. Like I said, this is kind of a frustrating part because there's so many pieces at this point that you'll be trying to hold in place, hold still, you know. I snug them up. Like I said, I never tighten anything all the way until I've got everybody in place where I want them. So, there we go, those snug. Motors pulled up. Those look like they're where they're supposed to be. Ground wire's good. My marks I made earlier are lined back up. Yeah, we'll call that line back up. So they are lined back up. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and snug up the motor bolts, screws. So I did have that set right. I just didn't have the motor pulled up against the wall, so it was touching. So, like I said, patience, don't freak out. This is not a very good video, I know. I'm not very good at making videos. Haven't done too many of them. Kind of shaky, drank a lot of coffee. But I thought maybe people would enjoy it. Maybe seeing how to do it. Hopefully nobody decided to ride the Blue Dragon, because now you're probably not doing this. Anyway, so, okay, those are snug. Bolt feels good. Everybody turns. Oh, it feels good. You can feel it. It's really smooth. So, there we go. Now you got to hook your switch back up. If you took pictures, look at them. I had to look at them at this point. Black wire goes on the bottom leg of the switch. You just pop them back on. Red wire goes on the top leg of the switch. Pop that back on. Flip it over. I like to make sure my white wire's out of the way. Make sure all your wires are out of the way of the belt. Out of the way of all the moving parts. Your ground will pretty much loop itself around so it's out of the way. You can put another zip tie on this guy if you want. It was zip tied up like this, so it was over here. It'll sit out of the way. It's fine. So I'm gonna leave it like that for now. But yeah, now really just put the covers back on. Don't lose your little screws. I'll put the little ones on there first. Once again, I don't tighten anything down until I have them all started. You might do it differently. You might do any part of this different than I did. And if you found a different or an easier way, drop it in the comments. I'd like to hear how you did it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just like to see how there's different things. Don't tighten these down too terribly hard or you will pull them through the rubber feet. Just snug them up real nice so you can feel it when they get where they need to be. There we go. There we go. And I am actually going to leave the top off until I've plugged it in, tried it out, watched it, seen it. Let's do that. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully my floor tone that I replaced that one with is not too loud, but down in my tumbling abode, hope everybody has a place like this they can retreat to. So let's give it a shot. I plugged it in. I got the top open so I can check it out. Let's see if she's quiet. Aha! Very quiet, no clicking. Shaft's turning nice and smooth. No sort of vibrations or anything. Really smooth. She feels nice. I think that's a win. So yeah, like I said, have patience. Have patience. Take pictures. Don't freak out. Take your time. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.